Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Autogefuehl. Today with me AJ and Michelle. It might be cold where you're watching, but not here. It's sunny. I'm in the south of France, just a couple hours outside of Cannes, and today we have the all-new Kia e-Niro. It's based on the same Niro platform that we've seen with the hybrid and the plug-in hybrid, but how does it fare as a fully electric vehicle? Let's find out today. Are you ready? Come on, let's go! The front of the Niro is very similar to the rest of the Niro family, but to emphasize that it's the electric version, the tiger nose grille has been masked off. It also houses the power sockets to charge the car. Apart from that, you also have these very shiny electric blue trims on the front bumper. Also, again, unique only for the e-Niro. You get LED daytime running lights as well as full LED headlamps as options on the mid-vision trim level. And on the top Spirit trim, it comes as standard. By the way, it's 1,000 euros extra as the optional in the mid-spec. The daytime running lights are also LED and are these really cool arrowhead design. Overall, the car is 1.8 meters wide and it weighs about 1,800 kilograms. The Kia e-Niro is 4.37 meters long, which is about the same as the other hybrid and plug-in hybrid versions of the car. But what is different are these wheels. These are bespoke wheels which come only with the e-Niro. They're 17 inches, diamond cut dual tone, very aerodynamic. And that's okay because this car has regenerative brakes. So the regular friction brakes, the disc rotor and the caliper are not going to be generating as much heat in a regular car as a regular car would, so you don't need to have such large openings in the wheel, and in this way they're more streamlined. Even the bumper is a little bit redesigned so that it's a little bit more smoother and overall more aerodynamically efficient, which is the name of the game for electric cars, right? Speaking of electric cars, the battery pack is actually underneath the chassis. It's kind of bolted from the bottom, and this is how they designed this platform when it was conceived to kind of accommodate this. And because of that, I'll show you in a bit, there's actually no loss in the trunk. In fact, we have more space. How's that possible? Tell you in a minute. Apart from that, it's a 5-door configuration, so you have 2 on each side and a big hatch. I do like the overall stance. It's nothing that really draws at your heartstrings. It's a very conventional crossover design, which is very popular nowadays, which again is a kind of it's a bit subjective. To me, I want electric cars to kind of redesign and redefine what cars can look like and what's acceptable. And I think cars like Teslas or the BMW i8 hybrid, they kind of draw your attention. They shout out that I'm different, I'm new, I'm fresh, I'm the future. And this is just, it's a Niro. You might want that, you might not. What do you guys feel? Do you like that this is a subtle, it's not shouting out that it's an electric car, or would you prefer this to be a little bit more, fancier? Let's take a look at the back of the e-Niro. I think here the design is, again, not that exciting. It doesn't shout out future electric to me. Although the tail lamps are full LED and they do have a little bit of a 3D effect. You do have a glossy black spoiler, which kind of hints that this car has sporty handling capabilities. And in fact, on paper at least, it would seem so, because it also has independent rear suspension. The battery on the floor, which is a long, wide slab essentially, is low down, provides good weight distribution and a lower center of gravity. It's got torque vectoring as well as a faster steering rack. So how does that all translate? We'll see later on. But apart from that, the bumpers are again a little bit redesigned. You have this electric blue dash of color on either side like we saw in the front. I also like this little touch, which is kind of similar to a diffuser, but not really. Again, just adds a little bit of extra flair to this otherwise pretty boring back. But what I mentioned earlier and what I want to highlight on is the trunk space. Now, in the hybrid, in the plug-in hybrid version of the Niro, all the electric gubbins with the battery and the motor and, not the motor, but the battery and all the other accessories that go with that are stored below the boot floor. And hence, you don't have that much space. But because the battery in the e-Niro is further up front, below the floor, all of this is usable space. In fact, it even goes below this. You have the charging cables. So this is 451 liters of, I think, very usable space. With this floor down, it's a very flat loading area, very rectangular. You also have a parcel shelf, which is a bit flimsy, and a bit fiddly to put up, but provides a nice cover to hide things if you're storing them down. Fairly high loading lip, but still a nice rough scuff plate so you don't damage your bumper. And you do have switches to tumble the seats in a 60-40 fashion from the back. And voila, very flat loading area. Of course, you can get rid of this very easily. And if you take this out, then you can see that there is a very generous amount of space. Here we have the key fob for the Kia e-Niro. It's got keyless entry, so I can just leave it in my pocket, push this button to unlock and open the door. It opens fairly wide, and it's a pretty tall door, of course, being a compact crossover SUV. The materials here are not that bad, actually. They're soft touch, although it's quite monotone, as you can see. There are some nice elements like this glossy piano black inlay with this textured, these diamond shapes, which look pretty cool and futuristic. Window controls, mirror controls, seat memory. This car comes with the optional JBL speaker system, which in all honesty is a bit disappointing. And we'll talk more about that later on, I guess, but you definitely want this, because if this is already not that powerful, I don't think the standard speaker setup would be suitable for you either. Some beverage holders over here. Now let's check out the seats. We do get fully adjustable automatic seats, even with lumbar support adjustment. You get 3 different options. You get a full fabric, or rather a fabric plus synthetic leather combination. You get a full synthetic leather combination, and you get a full animal leather combination. We obviously prefer the first 2, but they also have these nice stitching elements along the edges, combined with the air vents on the side, the border on the air vents, and the bumpers. It's kind of like a theme that they have going on with this electric blue dash. Let's sit inside. Ingress is really easy. Again, being an SUV. Turn the power on. Did you hear that? This is one thing I don't really like. It just keeps bonging and dinging and beeping and singing, and I don't get it. I know I sat in the car, I pushed the power button, I know the door's open. It's just a bit a bit of an overkill in my opinion. But on the plus side, there's a lot of technology, which we'll talk about once I'm driving as well. But in terms of the instrumentation as well, you have a nice digital instrument cluster. This is a nice wide 7-inch display, which gives you a lot of different options regarding the navigation, the different assistance systems that you have. Also different driver assistance systems, such as lane keeping assist, driver attention, lane departure, forward collision alert, blind spot monitoring, rear collision, cross traffic alert. Really useful things. A lot of convenience features as well, like the seat. When I open the door, it slides back to make it easier to get out, and once I sit inside and close the door, the seat will come forward again. Smart recuperation is also very interesting, and I will talk about that as well when I'm driving. But apart from that, you can see that on today's drive, we've been averaging 15.5 kilowatt hour per 100 kilometers. And that leaves us with a range of about 325 kilometers. And the truth is, yes, in the city urban cycle, it is rated at over 600 kilometers. I think it's about 615. And on a combined cycle, it's 455, which is already really great. But the catch is, if you put it in dynamic mode and you put your foot down, wave goodbye to those big numbers, really. I mean, this is still very acceptable, but that is the truth about electric cars. Anyway, steering wheel is really nice. A lot of controls for the smart cruise control, audio controls, telephony, headlights, wipers, and interesting paddle shifters, which I will talk about later on. These control the regen brakes, and I will demonstrate that while driving. This car also has a sunroof, albeit it's not that large, it's fairly small and not panoramic. It does let in nice light and air. Sunglasses holder, a vanity mirror with a lamp, although it is a manual switch to turn on the lamp and it turns off when you flip it up again. But it's got one, so that's all that really matters. Auto dimming mirror, which again, depending on the trim, is optional or standard. But this is something that's really interesting. This is a series of bulbs that light up when you plug in the car for charging, so you can kind of just track the progress of the charge when you just look at the car from outside. Materials are fairly good, actually. Soft touch on the top. This is hard, but I do like the different textured elements and the different colors and these dashes of blue again along the edges of the vents. Let's talk about the infotainment screen, because it's 7 inches. That's nice. It's not that big in the end, but it's okay. However, I find that it's not that responsive. Swiping is okay. You have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but the navigation is a bit small. So if I go to address, or if I go to, let's just go to nav and go to previous destinations, and let's just pick one. And you can see here that with the navigation, it's not that easy to use. Again, it keeps beeping. You can turn that off, of course, but it's just not that responsive. And I wished that, in today's day and age, 2019, when this car is out, it would be a little bit better. But apart from that, there's a lot of different options you can set for the menus. And down here, you have some hotkey buttons to jump to radio, jump between tracks, for example. A volume knob, which is nice, so you can always, it's easier to control. The power on button, your climate control, which again is pretty interesting because, of course, it offers you really good comfort, which has automatic climate control and heated and ventilated seats, even heated steering wheel. But there's also options such as this driver-only function, as you can see here, where it will use the vents near the driver's seat only. It will even have, you can even spec an optional advanced heat pump, which will use the heat that is generated by the battery and recycles that heat to warm up the engine. Warm up the cabin. So this way it's a little bit more efficient. Of course, there's a button to turn it off. This is a nice tray to drop your phone in. It's got wireless charging, which is useful. You also have a 12-volt socket and another USB socket along here. And this is, again, something very new. This is the shift-by-wire center console, because being an electric car, there is no need for any kind of a transmission. There's no lever, there are no linkages. It's just this rotary dial to choose between drive, reverse, neutral, and park. So below here, you have a nice rubber matted tray to drop in some bigger items. Electronic parking brake with auto hold. Heated ventilated seats for the front drivers and the passenger. Heated steering wheel, parking sensors. And down here as well, a lot more storage with, beverage holders, which you can cover up, and even a central armrest with yet another power socket. Or, sorry, in this case, it's a USB. Backseat of the e-Niro. Well, the door opens really nice and wide, which means it's useful to put your children's seats in, especially with these ISOFIX points on the outside two seats. But there is very limited storage. There's only enough space for a water bottle, not much else. Nice glossy inlays as we saw in the front. Getting in is a cinch, being so nice and tall that it is. The bench is a little bit on the lower side. You know, I'm 5'8" or 1.7 meters, and knee room is great. Headroom is ample. I can slide my feet under the front seat if it was higher. In this case, I cannot, but there's enough space. But you can see that my thighs are off the seat, which means that it is a bit low, and people who are taller, their knees will be even higher. It's a bit odd. It's a bit strange. But on the plus side, I do have air conditioning vents. There is no charging ports or power supply. Some nets here. Center armrest with some cup holders. But this plastic is pretty hard, which means sitting in the backrest is a bit firm and stiff and uncomfortable. In the middle seat, yeah. Michelle was complaining about that. The truth is, the bench is fairly flat. It's okay. Again, it's a bit low. And there is not much of a transmission tunnel, so there's good space here. But I do agree that that cup holder and the armrest is a bit unnecessarily stiff. Overall, it's a good four-seater. Even a five-seater perhaps is a smaller adult or a younger child who doesn't need a seat can sit in the middle. With the sunroof, with the big windows, with this crossover body style, it is a family car. Now let's talk about the battery and the motor for the new Kia e-Niro. This is a bit of a challenge for me because I'm a petrol head and now I have to be a battery head. We have to come up with a name for this. But yeah, I'm good at engine displacement, cylinder configurations, the clutch and the transmission, blah, blah, blah. But now I need to know about kilowatt hour, battery size, and so on. So the Kia e-Niro, it has two engine, or rather motor and battery configuration options. There is a 64 kilowatt hour battery and a 39.2 kilowatt hour battery. The bigger battery, or the better battery, in a combined cycle has a very respectable 455 kilometers of range, whereas the smaller one has 289 kilometers. But you want the bigger one because in an urban cycle, it's even rated at 615 kilometers, which is incredible, which is awesome. With a 100 kilowatt fast charger, you can charge the battery from 20% to 80% in about 42 minutes. The better battery also has a slightly more powerful motor. While both the motors produce about 395 newton meters of torque, there is the 64 kilowatt hour battery gets a 204 horsepower or 150 kilowatt battery, and the smaller one gets a 100 kilowatt or 136 horsepower battery. So of course, the more powerful battery motor combination goes from 0 to 100 in 7.8 seconds, while the lesser battery and motor configuration takes about 9.8. All right, let's start off our drive on the highway. It's a beautiful sunny day here in the south of France. We're just heading out of Nice airport and going towards Cannes, and hopefully maybe we'll go up to Saint-Tropez. I really want to see that place. So let's talk about some of the things that Kia have done to this car to make it, you know, very useful as an electric car, because I really like these small details that they've paid attention to. They haven't spent money, you know, designing and engineering an electric car from the ground up. No, they were smart enough to know that, okay, when we design the Niro, it's going to be an electric car in the future, and we have to keep that in mind. And they designed this platform knowing that it was going to be used for electric cars in the future. So that's why it has things like independent rear suspension, and it has, you know, the way the battery's mounted below the chassis to liberate more space, or rather not take up more space on the interior, all these kinds of things. And the money, therefore, has then been spent on technology to make the battery and the range and the motor that much better. So things like recuperation, or the regeneration of the brakes. I love the electric motor. Instant torque when you want to overtake like this. It's so fun. It's 204 horsepower, which is not significant. It's okay. But you get instant torque from 0 RPM, as with all electric motors, and that really helps out on the highway. In the city as well, it's really useful to just dart in and around these empty gaps in the cities, in the gaps in the traffic that you find. Anyway, back to the technology that I was talking about. In terms of regeneration, for example, there's 4 different levels, or 5 actually, different levels of the amount of regeneration that these brakes can achieve. You can see a little symbol down here, and you use these paddle shifters for that. So in level 0, there is no regeneration whatsoever. So I'm accelerating right now. I release the accelerator pedal and the car is just completely coasting. This is a great way to save energy as well, because I need to maintain the same speed. I can put on level 1, and now if I release it, it starts braking a little bit. 2 brakes it a little bit more, and 3 is, provides pretty strong retardation actually. But what I really like is the automatic mode. So you just hold the lever on the right side for a while and it becomes automatic. And in this mode, the software that's running the GPS, the software that is running, the adaptive cruise control, they call it the smart cruise control, the software which is, analyzing the cameras, for example, which is monitoring the traffic in front. All of these things work in conjunction to determine how much of regeneration should be used. And this is really smart, because right now I'm accelerating, there's nothing in front, so if I let go, it's coasting, because it knows I'm on the highway and I'm at higher speeds. But if I'm in the city and there are cars in front and it sees that there's, the topography is changing on the GPS, or there's a curve coming up ahead, the smart system will adjust that recuperation accordingly, so that it gives me a very balanced, smart way of having the acceleration and having the regeneration. And it's something you notice. It doesn't really feel really odd, because in a conventional internal combustion engine, the engine anyway gives you engine braking. So as long as you don't release the clutch and there is no coasting features in a regular manual car like the one I drive every day, my car, it's a very basic manual transmission. So if I'm in 5th gear on the highway and I let go, I use that engine braking. And I feel that retardation that is happening because of that. So this regeneration kind of emulates that, so it's very easy to get along with. Similarly, it also creeps. So, essentially an electric motor doesn't creep. When you release the brake, it's when you supply electricity to the motor, and that's when it would actually start spinning. But when you release the brake, it already starts creeping forward. So in that way, the e-Niro feels very much like a regular car. And I think this is very crucial for the world to have a smooth transition into electric cars, So it still looks and feels and drives like a regular car, so it's easily acceptable. But all these subtle things like the technology here, I don't even have to use the brake pedal. I'm on the highway, so I can't really demonstrate too much. Let me go to the right lane. I can show you a little bit at least how, if I hold the other side, the left pedal, the regeneration brakes will effectively act like hitting the brake pedal. So I can use this to come to almost a full stop. 80% of the braking requirements I can achieve with just the regen brakes, either with the automatic mode that it's using or with this one pedal kind of system. Apart from that, I have cruise control, so I'm going to set that now. We're getting into some contraflow, so I'm going to keep the speed at a very safe limit. But in addition, with the smart cruise control, which monitors the distance with the car in front, it also has lane keeping assist, and this has intervention. So it is level 2 semi-autonomous up to, I think, a few seconds at a time. It's not something that you can just leave on and forget about it, but we're going around a right-hand bend. There we go. As you can see, I lost nerve. The car probably could have done it. There's a little bit of traffic around and I want to be safer. And this is a bit of a tight bend, but on the highway, the system works really well. Of course, Volkswagens have this, Mercedes have this, BMWs have this, Volvo also has a really good, this kind of a semi-autonomous highway feature, but it maintains the speed. It can even come to a complete stop. It can also accelerate, and it works from 0 to 130 kilometers per hour. So it is a fairly usable system. Apart from that, the sound insulation is pretty good, although it's a little bit, again, takes some getting used to, because generally, no matter what kind of a fancy car you're driving, and Michelle, we've driven some pretty fancy cars in this year. We were just talking about all the different things we did this year, and we've had a very interesting year. But there's always a constant engine drone in an internal combustion engine, even if it's a very, very expensive car with a lot of sound insulation. You hear that, and those vibrations it's a bit of a white noise at best, but it's there. And that kind of masks the road noise and the tire noise and the wind noise. Whereas here, excuse me, in the electric car, the wind noise and the road noise, is at the forefront. I notice it. And it's not necessarily because it's loud, but because it's something that I don't, it's louder than anything else really. So that way you feel that a little bit more. And other small things with electric cars that you need to get used to are things like, without the sound of an engine, for me at least, I use that as one of the indicators or a frame of reference to kind of estimate my speed subconsciously as I'm driving. I know that, okay, I feel the vibration, I hear the engine revving, that's kind of how I feel speed. But with an electric motor, you cannot rely on sound at all. You have to really look down at the number and then you realize, uh-oh, I'm going a bit too fast. But apart from that, it's very quiet. They have put a lot of sound deadening to this electric car to make it very, calm inside. The independent rear suspension as well. Of course, we're going to try to get on some twisty, winding roads to test the chassis. This has a faster steering rack than the hybrid Niros. This has a slightly different suspension setup with independent rear suspension. It also has torque vectoring for the steering. So and of course, electric cars with a battery in the bottom has a really low center of gravity and a good weight distribution. So we'll test that out. But on the highway, at higher speeds, if there's some undulations on the road, independent rear suspension will allow, for example, the right wheel, if there's some undulation on that side, it will buff it up and down, but it will not affect the other wheels. Yes, there's anti-roll bars and there are some physical connections, but unlike a torsion beam where they twist together in the same, and they're connected together, with the multi-link independent suspension, they're not. So it also helps have a very calm and smooth ride. It's also fairly wide. In fact, in the city, we found that it felt a bit tight to use. It is an SUV, so you have a good seating position. You're sitting up higher. You have a good visibility, nice sunroof, a large rear view mirror with a large rear window, tall windows on the sides as well. So you can see out really well. But because of that, it does feel a bit wide. And French city streets are pretty narrow. So it was a bit, it felt a bit tight. But I think this is a very good size for a car. As an electric car, this is very usable. The trunk is big, we saw that. It's bigger than the hybrids. The interior space, we saw that. It's got good space for 4 adults, easily, a 5th one as well. And overall, I think this is a good car. Forget if it's electric or not, it's just a good car. Now we're on some beautiful winding roads, which we have to share with bicyclists, but I don't feel bad about myself because I'm driving an electric car today, so I don't mind passing him. I'm gonna get out of eco mode and let's get into, there's normal, but there's sport. That's what I want. And by the way, so there's Eco Plus, Eco, Normal, and Sport. In Eco, it's the I'm not going to really call it a throttle. It's not a throttle. It's just the accelerator. But the response mapping, is limited. So you get very dull responses. The power output of the battery is also limited. And in this way, it you get a little bit more dull responses. You're going a little bit slower, but you're saving that much more battery. The steering wheel is also very light in the Eco mode. In Eco Plus mode, if you have the optional advanced heat pump, for example, that will use the heat that is being generated by the electrical systems and the batteries to actually start heating the cabin of the car. So the air conditioning system itself as an auxiliary unit isn't consuming the battery. It will also, of course, limit the speed and the throttle response. But even things like, you have the driver-only air conditioning, so it will heat or cool just this area of the car and not waste energy heating the rest of the car. And in normal mode, it's a little bit more balanced. The steering wheel is a little bit heavier. You get pretty decent responses, but it's not something which is, it's not really going to thrill you. But on a road like this, you want the full power. Everything is turned up to 11. The steering wheel also is considerably heavier. And of course, this also has a faster steering rack as compared to the hybrids. So in that way, you get really nice responses. The suspension has been retuned to account for the weight and the lower center of gravity of the battery. So the car doesn't roll around too much at all. This even has brake-based torque vectoring, so if we come to a tight corner, we'll try that out. We'll see how it feels. But again, I really have to kind of change the way I feel about electric cars when I'm driving fast, because I kind of miss the sound of a nice V6 or a nice V8 or even a nice Turbo 4. I miss that sound. This does make a very spaceship-like kind of a sound, but it's really barely audible when you're driving like this. Independent rear suspension as well, really helping out on really narrow streets like this. Each wheel is getting the grip that it needs. Tires are actually quite grippy. The regen is still in auto, so I also like that because, like I mentioned earlier, it gives you kind of that emulation of engine braking. But again, see, these streets are quite narrow, so I'm not really able to go that quickly. But the car does feel a bit wide. I don't know if you can hear that on the microphone, but it made that kind of a whoosh sound. You did? Michelle heard it a little bit. Going into some villages, beautiful French villages, but let's slow it down a bit. 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 9.8 seconds for the smaller battery. This is 7.8, so that's not shabby at all. It does drive pretty well. I mean, I've driven some Kias before, and primarily the Soul. I've spent a few days on several occasions in the US driving that for a few days, but I never felt like that car was in any way dynamic. It felt really dull to me, and in that way, this car is much, much nicer in terms of driving dynamics. So we've talked a lot about the things that I like, that are good. A few things that I really, right off the bat, I did not like. It didn't take me long to dislike. Are first of all, the navigation system. The infotainment as a whole is, I think, okay. It takes some getting used to. It's not really the slickest. It's not the most sophisticated, but the navigation is just really slow to respond. And especially if you move, with your finger, see, I'm getting no response. It's really dull. And it's not that intuitive either. So that's one thing. It does feel a bit wide, but again, it's a family crossover, so a smaller car wouldn't really make sense. If you want a smaller electric car, there's other options. Thanks for stopping. There are other options like the Renault Zoe. Michelle and I, we filmed, I think, some time ago, the Smart 4.2 electric. So that's there. So this is kind of a jack of all trades electric car with an SUV stance, a little bit of a higher ground clearance. You shouldn't go off-roading with this. This is only front-wheel drive, by the way. So, but even if it's front-wheel drive, it's okay in terms of driving dynamics because that battery is really low down, so it gives a good center of gravity, and because it's a long slab, it gives a good weight distribution between the front and the rear axles. So the chassis that way is actually really nice. So this does drive a lot better than other small crossovers. Brakes really well too. And it also has advanced safety features such as forward collision alert with not just an audible warning, which it didn't do actually, because of course it was not a collision kind of a scenario, but it also will intervene and do an automatic emergency braking as well. So overall, this is packed with a lot of great technology. Kia has packaged it very smartly in a car that looks like a regular car. Now that's something a little bit more subjective. Objectively, I would say it's a smart decision in terms of a business model and engineering requirements. But yeah, you don't have, a Tesla Model 3 is undoubtedly a Tesla Model 3. This looks very much like any e-Niro. Even the hybrids, they all look very similar. There's very small cues to kind of distinguish itself, and maybe you like that. Maybe you want something that shouts out to everybody around you saying, hey, I'm driving an electric car. Why aren't you? Then, yeah, this probably wouldn't, check that box for you. But on the whole, as a whole package, it's pretty good. I think the audio system, the standard one, should have been a little bit better, but at least you have the option of upgrading them. The navigation is a miss. I think could have been a little bit better. And yeah, with that, I think this driving dynamics segment feels like I think I have a good idea of what this car is capable of, and as an electric car, I'm pretty impressed. The Kia e-Niro starts at 34,000 euros for the base edition. The mid-spec trim, called the Vision, starts at around 38,000 euros, and the top end, the Spirit, starts at around 40,300 euros. And its competitors, well, first of all, you got to keep in mind that this shares the platform. So the motor and the battery more or less is shared with the Hyundai Kona, which is a little bit smaller, but also other competitors like the Nissan Leaf, as well as, let's not forget, the Tesla Model 3 when it finally starts getting delivered here in Europe. At this price point for 40 grand, it is a bit of a stretch, I agree. But the base edition for 34, I think, is a good bargain. And let's not forget, this car is made in Korea and comes with Kia's industry-leading 7-year, 150,000 kilometer warranty, which is fantastic because that covers the battery and the electric motor. So with that, it is hard to fault a car like this. Again, it's not trying to be a Tesla, but it's got enough range. It drives fairly well, it's comfortable, it's got plenty of space. Again, that trunk is bigger than its hybrid siblings. And in the end, only a few things let it down, which again are minor niggles that perhaps you can very easily learn to live with, like that constant bonging, which I'm sure you can turn off. And the sound quality, yeah, with those speakers, maybe there's a way you can easily use aftermarket speakers to upgrade that if you wish. But overall, the build quality is great, it's a reliable car, and you got to become a battery head. No more petrol heads, right? So why not start with this? Thanks for watching. Let me know what you guys feel. Put your comments down below. And it's the end of the year. I think we had a great year, so I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Michelle says the same. So we wish you guys very pleasant holidays. We'll see you in 2019. We're trying to put together as many reviews for you as possible. I think this weekend, all the teams in Autogefuehl are really busy. Thomas and Jonas are working in south of Portugal for a BMW. And I think in Barcelona, there's Brian and Holger with a Seat. So stay tuned, hit the subscribe button, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll see you guys on the other side.